Okay, let's get this started. Morning one line, how are you doing? Oh man. I just got a coffee. Andreas, good morning. How you doing? Well, good day. Good day. Just got a coffee and it's very mud-like. So I will probably be talking a lot faster in a little while. I'm still waking up. Slow morning so far, definitely not a typical one. um, I've kind of got into a habit of I do like to have a cup of coffee in the morning. Normally I don't get it until after the stream though, because oftentimes I'll order the coffee because then I'm not making a pot of coffee for myself because then there's too much coffee to drink. So I just order a small coffee and that's good. But I got it before the stream today because I've been up since before 5 a.m. So use lady loading proxies. Yeah. So yeah. Okay. So I'm going to get straight into this today because this is driving me crazy. I've been trying to fix this since yesterday's stream, and I have been struggling. I I have to remember to switch off a streamer mode on Discord because I have Discord open on the dev PC as well, and not the stream PC. And it pings in my ear, and if I don't turn it off, I can't avoid looking at every single message. So I've definitely got some attention issues, that's for certain. Okay, so yesterday we left this. So we have the application, and we are trying to assign projects, associate projects with the application, with the planning item. So if you haven't seen this before, this is an agile planning tool, and basically the idea here is that the planner doesn't need to care about what specific projects this goes to, just that they associate it with these projects, because the work that's created might not land on the teams responsible. So when I save this now, what should happen, and what's not happening, is which one didn't start? The one that I need didn't start. Planning items. No, planning items is running. But there's nothing associated. Awesome. Yeah. This is going to be one of those issues that just keeps plaguing me, I think. Or I'm gonna learn a valuable lesson about entity framework. So the experience I'm having, or the problem I'm seeing, is that when I update a collection which is associated with another object, so I have the planning items table, and I'm updating the associated projects of this planning item via a navigational property and entity framework. And in the actual planning item, if I go to the domain, I do this in the planning item, right? So the planning item has all of its behavior associated to managing its own object state. And in here, when I load up the associated projects, Mr. Jones, good afternoon. What's happening is it's remembering the state that it was in previously, which is not correct. And that's the challenge I've got to overcome. So I've never seen this before, but then again, I've never used navigational properties as I'm using them now. So this could be a side effect of this. So what I've just done is enabled lazy loading proxies. Now so that it won't automatically load the associations. It shouldn't cache the associations. It should only reference the associations when I ask for it or when I specifically include it. We'll see how that behavior changes things. But I've never seen caching behavior like this before. So if we go over here now, we have nothing on make the UI look awesome. So we're going to assign planning and story. We're going to save. $500. Associated ticket that planning item is not virtual. Use change tracking proxies requires all types. Okay, there we go. Okay. And maybe that's actually going to tell me my issue. So if I go to associated ticket, my planning item is not virtual. Maybe that was my problem. Now that breaks that because now my planning item, that's a bad. Yeah. Hey, Captain Fuba, how you doing? Yeah, the planning item caching, or a seeming cache, that was tripping up. Yes, the last couple of days is still causing me woes. How's things? So let's clear that. Load that. Come on. 8 projects should start. Planning items running is fine. Which one isn't running there? API gateway running. Yeah. No, it shouldn't be caching at all. That's the problem. It should be a query on a different context. So that's the weird thing. So when we load this up and save that, parent does not have a default constructor. The default constructor, must be explicitly defined. That's interesting. So by turning on, what I've done is I've turned on lazy loading proxies. So Entity Framework will defer loading navigational properties until you request them. So if you don't actually request them, you end up with just the core query. But then if you request something, it'll make an extra query to get that. It does keep the initial queries faster because you end up with smaller queries just pulling the root table. But then you have more queries. Now again, pulling by primary keys, so it shouldn't be that slow, but you end up pulling the associated data in a different way. So what's happening here is the planning item that I have there's a default constructor on that one. Parent does not have a default constructor. Oh. That's interesting. That's very interesting. So it's trying to construct the tree in a different. That's interesting. So let's turn off proxies. Let's restart the application. So by default, Entity Framework shouldn't have any caching enabled. That's a feature that I have to add in. And the specifications library that I'm using should also not have caching turned on by default. So nothing should be holding on to it. The repository that I'm getting, I believe, is transient. So I should get two separate, completely separate instances of the repository. So the repository shouldn't be holding on to anything anyway. So when I save, I remove my breakpoint. So now there's my two items, right? Associated projects over here should eventually receive, there's my message, and that has two associated projects. Okay. So now, when I load this up, there's my two. Okay, so when I refresh the screen, that actually loads from the view. So if that view hasn't been updated, those two properties won't be there. So now let's remove story, and let's put a breakpoint here. What I'm hoping to see is that associated projects has two items. Right? So here we go. So we're passing in one project identifier. Associated projects has two, so we should be removing one, right? And we are, as our removal of our associated project. So this is again a navigational property. And then we publish the event. And we should have in here 1 and in here 1. Actually still 2. 1 should get removed shortly once that Kafka event processes. Yeah. Nope, apparently not. I'm not worried that the but no, there we go. So even though I'd removed one, and the table agrees, so that's committed to the database, right? I have one left. The Kafka message, when it's being built, is saying, oh, there's two associated projects, and it's publishing both of them. And that's what this is showing here. So let me just it publishes both associated projects. So I'm just not entirely sure why it would do that, right? Why would it hold on to the associated projects? So again, if I go to the application subscriber, so this is when that event happens, right? So this event, this planning item updated event, happens once the data is committed to the database. So this pull here should load the planning item back out of the database, because this repository should not be the same. And as far as I can tell, as far as the documentation goes on the specifications library, there is no built-in caching. An Entity Framework doesn't cache by default. I haven't got any caching options enabled. So why is this pulling the wrong list? So now if I go in here, the way to demonstrate this now, I go in here and I say, okay, well, let's have tenant management now. What we'll see is there'll be 3 projects, right? So we get here, Associated projects only has one. That's fine. So here you go. Associated projects in this context has one item so far. We're going to add in a second one. So here, this knows there's one project already there, and we're adding a second one. It'll take a minute for the database to catch up. So there's the 2 records, and our notification outbox is down here, and this will eventually process, and now we get there. So now when we go to associated, so we F10, associated projects has got 3. So why does that have 3 now? So that has the one I removed initially and that. But the context that I just was working in only had the one project. It was correct. So it's something I'm doing wrong. It's something I've configured incorrectly. I just don't know what I've configured incorrectly right this second. And I don't exactly know what I'm looking for because it's not a caching issue. Can it be that Kafka does not process a message because it's configured for bigger? No, I flush after every message. And besides, this is going to Kafka. This is before Kafka. This is the thing that fires the integration event. This is the planning. This is a domain event, planning item updated, which triggers an integration event, which is planning item updated. Planning item updated. Planning item integration event. So this publishes the Kafka event. So this is before Kafka. This is entity framework plus repository. But why has it got 3? Why is it holding on to data? These are scoped. But even if they weren't, the only way that would be is if this held on to its repository and everything and cached the data. I can't think of what chain of events would trigger this to happen this way, right? So if I stop it, right, so C3, now if I start it again, that event will fire because the outbox has stored that message, right? So there's still an outbox message there to process. Hey Dota, how you doing? So now when I run it again, so it's definitely an in-process problem because watch this. When it runs and it triggers that event, and I F10 now, it knows there's 2 associated projects. So now if I run it, there's 2. So when it loads fresh, it's fine. That throw if null thing is cool. Yeah, so the reason I'm doing that is the way I'm doing that is because if that is actually null for whatever reason, it's an absolute exception. Because that should not be null. So I'm using this as both an indicator to myself that this isn't a documenting, oh, if this can be null. This is an actual, if this is null, explicitly throw an exception. Yeah. So if I thought it could be null and I should handle it, then I'd do, right, I'd do it that way. And that to me tells me that I'm expecting it could be null. Whereas this way, I'm saying, nope, can't be null. Yeah, so something is either holding on to the data. Do I control the lifetime of these handlers? Add Kafka, add outbots. Because these... I don't control it because I'm using mediator. This is the mediator library that I'm using, I don't configure any of these things. Their lifetimes are notification handler, mediator, action. So the repository finds the item. The problem is the repository. So this repository here is a very simple implementation on top of. So that's the repository. That repository is this, right? And this is just so I get specificity. This version is only so I know the specific context I'm working with here. Down here, this is the, I think this is the Adalis library now. Yeah, this is Adalis' version. This is just an extension to give me the repository and trap the DB context. That's the only reason that's there. And this is just so I have context available to me. Hopefully this question isn't a wrench. Why is that method class there? It's almost a middleman. Which one? This? So this is to react to system changes. So this publishes an integration event, right? So when I change the planning item, so again, the planning item gets changed, right? The planning item, you've seen the diagram more than most people, I would imagine, at this point. This goes into the planning item. I modify the state of the planning item. As I do that, I trigger events, the domain events inside, and when I commit that data to the database, I publish those events so that they can be handled by whatever else. This is a reaction to that planning item updated event occurring. What this does then is loads the planning item out. This is because single default is the only method I have available to me, right? This argument null is, again, if that is null for whatever reason, then the system's broken, throw an exception, right? Don't even try and publish something to Kafka. And then I turn around and publish the integration event so that the view can get that data, right? So yeah, it's a middleman, because it translates that, oh, I need to tell the wider system something happened, so it's publishing that integration event. So it's loading that item back out of the repository. No, separate concerns. Why does the repository care about publishing? The repository is related to data access. It shouldn't be doing publishing at the same time. Yeah. So this is a disconnect. This is the system being aware of its behavior and being able to kind of notify me. The benefit here is I can react to all sorts of different events if I want to. If I want to react internally, if I want to do some calculation, or I want to update some other stuff or publish other events, I can react to, oh, the review date changed, the planning item was updated, etc. If I want to integrate with the larger system, I publish to Kafka. This could be a library method likely. After all, repository events, you want to publish something. No, not after all. So again, repository is just the data access piece. The only hookup into the database is the interceptor to say, okay, are there domain events on this object when I save it? Yes, there are. Okay, they get published as domain events through mediator. it's possible I don't want to publish anything, but this is to allow the system to be reactive. And again, responsibility. This has the sole responsibility of publishing that integration event in reaction. If I want to do different things in reaction to a planning item updated, I can create different handlers and they will all do their thing. The issue I'm seeing here is this is holding on to old data. But when I load the planning item, so when I get into here, right, this version has the right version. So this is the exact same call, almost. Entity by identifier spec. The only difference is this. And I do that because I need the actual planning. I need the associations for... Okay, so for this one, I just need the root entity. I don't need any associations. So I just need I've got the identifier, go get me the planning item, right? So this one here, I don't have those associations. When I call update on the domain service, and again, the domain service exists because there's a bit more going on in there, and I don't want to put that in the application layer. This will eventually contain logic or whatever it needs to contain to determine whether I should update things. Again, I'm doing this guard because if that is null for whatever reason, I've called into here, so why the heck do I have a null there, right? That's only because singular default is the only method I have available in the repository. Here, this planning item by identifier is the one that it includes the associations, right? But being that they're not lazy loaded, they're probably there anyway. So if we look here, and we look here, so right now the system's in an agreement, right? So I've got 11, so they just so happen to be 11 on both sides right now. That is just because of the way the data's been created, right? So they both happen to be 11. Don't rely upon this ID. It's these IDs that ultimately matter, but the associated projects for project ID, for planning item ID 11, make the UI look awesome. These two projects. Over here in the view side of things, right? Those are the actual projects. That's the planning item. Again, make the UI look awesome. Just happens to be 11, right? And there's two items assigned to it. Interestingly, this tool doesn't order by ID. So there's two associated. So the system is in balance right now. So if I add story and save, oh, I'm not running. that will help substantially in the testing if I actually save things. So we're just waiting for that to say 8. So don't doubt that it's something I'm doing wrong. I don't think the design is incorrect. The design feels correct. It feels like I've disconnected the right components. What doesn't feel right is that caching behavior. So if I include story now and hit save, we're going to hit a few breakpoints, right? So we get here. Our planning item has no associated projects. Because I've flagged this, it's going to tell me this all the time, so it's nice and helpful. Right, so, but this version isn't going to load those associated projects because it's not actually pulling that that piece. So if I go through and I go here now, 2 associated projects, that's agreement, right? So we have 2 in there. We hit run, right? This is the actual update of those projects. So we've passed in 3, we've got 2. So we should have no projects to remove. And we should have 1 project to add, right? So we F10, 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 F10. We associate the project. We hit F5. Our database here now has 3 records, right? This is our thing triggering. We now have 3 records here, right? We hit F5. We have 3 associated there. Eventually we'll get 3 over here when this loads. There you go. So there's 3 projects. So planning, tenant management, and story. If I refresh this, planning, tenant management, and story should be there. Right. Okay. Now, we remove story. Actually, let's remove planning, because planning was originally there and is now not. Story is the one that was added last. We hit save. We get here. Again, no associated projects here because I'm not including that navigation property. I get here. 3. Yes, 3. That's correct. Yeah, I've got 3 because I'm removing 1. Okay, so we get here. We've got 2 coming in. We should have 1 project to remove. Right? So we've got 1 to remove, and there we go. Good morning, Apex. How you doing? So we've got 1 to remove and 0 to add. Behavior is correct. I've got unit tests around this piece as well, and everything checks out in unit tests. I know that doesn't guarantee anything, but yeah. Okay, so we've added the domain event, so now that adds that record into the outbox. Eventually that'll get picked up by the processing in the background to publish that event. So again, these are disconnected as well, right? These are different actual processes. This loading up is actually done by a different process. It's not the same process I just loaded. So it should have committed to the database, right? So I should have 2 records in here now, which I do. I have 2. But if you look, this planning item has 3. So again, not even in the same process as the one I was just using, right? That web request is actually completed. This is actually a background process running that has reloaded that data. So even if this was caching, that would make sense. It's what it looks like. If anyone can find any reference to Entity Framework by default caching navigational properties, I'd be interested in reading it, because I can't find where I'm doing this. I'm not doing it explicitly, that's for certain. So again, you can see this is 3 now. That's wrong. If I stop running, so I stop everything running, change tracker.clear. But then I'm taking responsibility for Entity Framework. This, again, this should be loading up. This isn't, in theory, this context could actually be a separate context, because I could actually have this on a read-only connection. But again, why did this one load up? So here, it loaded up with 3 items. This is if the change is never applied. But the only time I publish the event is when I've committed to the database. So it updated the database with the correct data. They're not separate. They are separate contexts. No, it's the same context underneath. It's a background process running here. So this one is this outbox, not the Kafka one, the mediator. So this is actually a monitoring service that's running independent. It's a background service. So it's actually as if it's not. I wonder if a context assumes it is the only thing. No, you can have multiple contexts, and you can have, because again, I'm using pool DB connections as part of this. Add pool DB context. But if I run that now, it will get the right data. So it definitely is something to do with caching. but I don't see anything that by default or even by deliberate act would give me this behavior. So caching at if it was caching at the repository level, do you grab those connections at similar times? No, completely separate times, because the web request coming in is going to grab one connection. The other one is going to grab it as that notification handler fires. So the only thing that would happen, the only thing that could cause that is if that notification handler was either a singleton, which I don't control the lifetime of that, or, but again, it should still query the database. It shouldn't, there's nothing set there to not query the database. So even if it was a singleton instance of the handler, it should still query the database, and it's not querying the database, or it's getting the old state out of the database. Phil Shamwell, hello, how you doing? Until the session resolved, I think it doesn't get floated until the sessions. So if I have two connections to the database open and I update the data state in one, and that event fires my persistence settings in where? I think you can set persist per session, or there are other options. I have never set anything like that. SQL Server with Entity Framework Core. I've never configured anything there. And again, if I run this now, it'll load up the right data. So why is this holding on? And what is doing it? Let's do this. So if I run it up, the good news is I can recreate the behavior. Right, so you see there, that had, now that has two, because that's loading from fresh. That is definitely loading what's there in the database. And why did that error then? So again, over here, I have 3 records. Eventually I should have 2. Did you process them? Notification outbox. No, you didn't. Why are you not processing? Okay, from that, let's just build and clear. So again, the behavior looks very much like the, okay, there we go. So again, I've got 2 because it's loaded correctly. That should fire off the event. That should then trigger this to react, and we should end up with 2 in here in a second once that processes, right? So there you go. There's what we got. There's our 2 associated projects. Okay, so now if we go back into here and we add planning back in, hit save, it should get to us some of our breakpoints from before. So again, this one doesn't matter, we can remove these breakpoints. This one matters. So again, we've got two. At this point, we've got two associated projects. That's fine. We go in here. We're going to remove that. And then we get to our yep, that's fine. Because again, that's now loading. That's loading the three. No. I didn't. They're in order. It happened to hit on the timer for this happening. No, I didn't. It completed. So again, this now has three. That's loaded from the database. So let's validate it. Actually, let's add a fourth project, and let's see what state it thinks it's in. Right? Because if it's caching it, it should think there's three. Fair enough. Let's add the fourth project. Hit save. Okay, this one, it knows there's three. Right? So now we've added that project. We've added the fourth project. So when we hit this next breakpoint, if it says 4, it's loading from the database. It's loading from the database because it's got 4. That's the same behavior as we saw before, right? So now over here, there's 4 projects. It's loading those 4 up. Now we run. So we now have 4 projects associated. Might take a second. There we go. There's all 4. Okay. So now let's remove one. Let's remove story. And hit save. There's our 4. That's fine. There is 4 right now because this is before the update. All right. So when we get here, technically there's the database has happened. The database changes happen. And I'll put a breakpoint there and run it. Right. So again, we're passing in 3. We've got 4. So now when I hit this breakpoint, there's 3. So our state in a database, this is a query in the database. Like I'll close everything down and reopen it. So that's a fresh query. There's 3 items in the database. I hit F5, 4 items. But we know that that's not caching because we loaded up the 4th item before. So we know it queried before. So why is it not allowing for the removal, but it's allowing for the addition? But if I stop running again, so now that outbox message, again, the outbox is just to give us the resilience for the messaging, right? Now the outbox message hasn't processed, so it'll need to refire. So it refires. So that's the refire. There's 3. There's 4 still here because the event didn't fire, so hold on. This is a timing issue when you grab the connection, it has to be. It grabs the connection. It should create an instance of this handler when it needs to fire the event. Again, it worked for the addition in the same sort of timeline. But they're in different contexts. They're in different ones in the background service. There's gone, it's processed. Okay. So repository. And I agree, it could be it's transient. That makes it worse, not better, because it's on demand. Because there's no point having a scope repository, because each piece is going to request it. But even so, repository transient means grab an instance when you request it, basically. A bit more nuanced than that. Whereas scoped is for the lifetime of a request. Once you create it, if you ask for it again within that request, you will get the same repository. Transient is get me one every time, and singleton is there is only ever one. Yeah, there can be only one. Yeah. Yep. I mean, that would be an answer, right? Everything's singleton. Just needs to check its state. Let's have a play. Let's see what happens. I think this will fail because I think I can't inject it as a scope service. I might have to do something weird for the scope. Okay, so we've got 3. Let's actually start with removing one. Let's start. There you go. Yeah, some services not good. So as a scoped instance, it can't be started because the services that it relies upon can't use scoped requests. There's a way of doing it, but I don't like how to do it, and that's actually interesting because actually what I've done is that I've forced a dependency. It's okay that it doesn't have to be scoped, and again, transient is I need a request. I need one. Give me an instance of it. The DB connections are pooled, so I'm saving something there. So it can't be scoped, by the way, because the service that runs in the background is this outbox monitoring service, and this is common. The hosted service is run and it can't take a scope. So what you normally do in those instances is you actually inject the dependency provider and create the scope in here. This is all decompiled because this is one of the libraries. A transient service is released if the request thread is currently awaiting something. I'm not sure. I've never had to dig that deep in. If you grab the DB connection outside of the setup of the services, would that fix it? No, because okay. So the DB context, that's transient. So I'm getting a context every time I request one. Again, the service that's publishing the integration message and the actual request are in actual different services because the background service is running for the worker thread for publishing the events to Kafka is running in its own service. It still gets the context. Does that need to be scoped? No. This is like async await. You start something, you kind of pass it all the way down. Scoped is there is one per request. So if you ask for the same if you ask for the same thing within the pipeline, you'll get the same instance, right? So the idea is for scoped, it's like an HTTP request. If you ask for the repository, every request should get that same repository because there's no benefit in not having it, right? Transient means if I do transient, then every single one that asks for it gets its own potential copy of it. Yes. Yeah. So a single request, yeah. Right. The service isn't transient. That's the problem. Background services, the way they're configured, you can't get yeah. So this has to be transient because the only other option I have is injecting the service provider and requesting a scope of repository every single time, and that's not acceptable because then I'm deferring. Then I can't inject an instance of iRepository. I actually have to inject the service provider and then request an instance of the repository, which is not something that is which is not something I want to do. These? Yeah, these are singletons because these are, you only need one instance of these because these are interceptors on the DB context. This is actually, these are the actual interceptors that publish the domain event. So and again, that's what I'm saying, that event that fires the updated gets put to the outbox. It doesn't invoke that code directly, right? What this does is it injects a record into this table, notification outbox in this case. It injects a record into this table, and then that other service picks up that message and says, "Oh, I've got something to process," and then it calls that handler. Right, so they're out of context, they're out of process. They're in completely different worlds. And then Kafka comes along and publishes the Kafka event, and that goes to that outbox, and that's processed as an outbox thing as well. So there's two outboxes. And the reason I have the outbox for the domain events is because of the fact that I might want to defer domain events until I have handled everything, right? So, and the only way I know that is when I've saved to the database, right? So when I update the item, all the domain events published, they're not handled on a case by case basis because I'm reacting to them and publishing integration events. If I directly wire them up into the mediator, those events would publish stuff, but if I then hit an error and roll back, I end up publishing events that are lies. Yeah, so here you get the change tracker, you get the entries of that type, and then you select the events. I also have one now for, whether it's good or bad, I don't know, but in the shared kernel, I always want to update the last updated of entity base when an entity is modified, so I just automatically update. I mark them as updated, so you don't have to explicitly do updated every single time. So those are the two interceptors I'm using. This is on saved changes. So again, I gotta figure out. Sorry for the bright flash of white. That's actually the docs for specifications. Do I have it open? I do. So I go. Let's go through the lifetime. So request goes in. Application. To entity. Then entity publishes domain events. So Forgive the roughness. So when I save changes, right, these domain events get published. They go to an outbox. There's a better way of describing this. I'm just trying to randomly throw these events in, so I'm talking about it. So the domain events get published to the outbox on save changes. So only when they've actually been committed to the database, the entity's been saved, do I actually publish these events, which get put into their own outbox. And again, the reason I did this is because, again, if something happens to update in the update, and this has to roll back for whatever reason, I don't want to have published these domain events out into the outbox or anywhere else before I've actually committed the state of the entity. Yeah, so I want to make sure that they only get published if it did see the current behavior. Potentially, yes, you would. That would explain it. However, again, I only publish the domain events into the outbox when the save changes has happened. And if you remember my breakpoint before, right? So I kind of have proved this. I put a breakpoint here, right? So the update has happened, the event happened, the state of the database right now reflects, when I hit here, reflects what I expect to see. That event is processed on like a 10-second timer, so the outbox event hadn't actually happened at that point. We could disprove the theory by grabbing a transient connection instead of from change tracker. Not quite sure I follow along there. So if you're new to the stream, I see there is several viewers in. If you are new to the stream and you have any thoughts or opinions on what I'm doing, or questions even, you're more than welcome to ask. I'm happy to as much as I'm trying to fix this, I am determined to learn, but I'm also happy to share and to demonstrate as well. So I was going to do something before, right? So what's the state of the database right now? So right now we have 3 objects. Let's start with removing one. So we haven't changed the state of the system. Let's start with removing one and see where that handler lies, right? So the system state is aligned. So we have 3 and 3, right? That's important just because I don't want to start making changes to the system when the system is out of whack, right? Because then I don't know what a positive change looks like. Come on, start the 8th project. I've got to pay attention. I've got to decide. The project that I'm using was there, but I don't want to start unless I've got 8 there. So if I remove an item, so I haven't changed the state of the system. I haven't added anything right now, right? So I haven't modified that. If I just remove an item, how many does this show straight away? Because it's the first query, right? That's what I'm trying to prove. Is it a caching thing? If it's a caching thing, then this will return 2. Because this will be in the correct state the first time it loads. So when I save this now, we get to our change here. And this isn't me modifying the state of the system. So now I've got 2. So now when that event fires, 2. It's a caching thing. Now let's add 1. And does that still say 2 or does that say 3? The breakpoint? There. No, I'm I'm gathering the list of things that I need to add or remove, etc., and then I'm modifying the state of the associated projects, and then I trigger the main event for updated, or rather, I add it into the queue. Okay, so now, once that event goes through, we should have 2 items in here. Yeah, that's fine. If I reload, I should have 2. Yeah, it's modifying the state of the associated projects collection. Okay, so now if I add one, let's add story. So I think tenant management was there before. I've removed the breakpoint from here, so that I should just get the integration message. 3. That's correct. That's now added that, right? So it's loading the data. Because I removed one, I got 2. I've added one in, I got 3. Now let's remove one again. No. So here we have 3 items. So what my thought there was, I started with a remove, so I ended up with 2 items. I then went to do an add. So if it was caching, that would have said 2, not 3. But it didn't, it said 3. So now I have 3 items over here. It's correct, the system is correct. What it doesn't seem to like is if I remove an item after I've added an item. I was trying to, before I was adding an item, then removing an item. No, yes, I was adding an item, then removing an item, right? So I always saw the add, and then I did the remove. What I just did is I reversed that to prove that the state of the system was correct. So it definitely loaded what was there because it now sent 3. So it's definitely querying from the database. So now if I remove one, let's remove ticketing. I hit save. We may or may not get here fast. It runs on a 10-second timer. So it's not aggressively querying the database. 3. It's like it ignored the, but if I go, so now I'm on a breakpoint, right? So that nothing's changing. There's 2. Is add then remove the same as remove then add? Is add then remove? Yeah, because all I'm doing is I'm removing items by reference from the collection, and I'm adding items, new items in. And again, if the collection state was bad, the database wouldn't reflect the true state of the data. That is correct. This is actually the data state. But now I've got 3 here. So I've removed an item, and this can't deal with the remove. But we just proved, so 20, 36, 37, 38, right? It's missing 37. 37 doesn't exist anymore. If I stop running, hey, good guy, mate. How you doing? Thank you for the follow. If I now run this again, it will load the actual state up again. So it is only a remove that causes this behavior, because it definitely dealt with it being added. And there's 2. That's correct. This is annoying. It's not so much it's getting an extra item, is when I remove an item from the list, the first time is fine. Actually, let's change the state again. So we've got 2 items in there, right? This is the first. This is we've obviously loaded it once because we've got the 2 items. So right now, it thinks there's 2 items in the database. I haven't changed any other state. Let's remove both of them. It's a valid operation. Does this say 2 or 0? I want it to say 2 to prove the problem with removes. Oh, you know, it doesn't do anything. Missing use case. So because I've put behavior on my domain, on my entity, right? Or 2 to 0. I've got a test around the actual entity itself and the domain service. The domain service validates that it calls all the right methods. The entity, so concerning planning item updated. When passing different projects, when passing no associated projects. That should have worked. That's that case. That is that case exactly. Okay. Let's go back to the domain service. Associated project. Let's go back here. The request in error. And it sent an empty array. I'm not showing every single thing on screen because there's that many windows. Whoa, no. What are you doing? Full stack. that would not be good, having a second version of the Angular app running at the same time. Coming up in July, I booked off the week after the 4th. My hope is that I can get my stuff set in a good place where I can actually spend several good days dedicated on this project. And the same in late August. Why do you think you're not? Also, I'm thinking that once I get over this hump, once this piece is done, my introduce prime ng branch that is way more than introduce prime ng, which is the exact thing I'm trying to avoid, right? This kind of snowball development. Once I get over this hump, I think I'll be spending some time focusing on deployment, whether that be Aspire or Kubernetes or something like that. I'm going to have to focus a little bit on the deployment of the application and start to get those questions answered before I build even more features. Dota, thank you very much for the contribution. I really do appreciate the conversation. Again, this is a frustrating issue. And I'm hoping it's one that's really simple and it's like, oh yeah, that's easily done. But I'll let you know if I find anything revolutionary. So have a great day at work. Thank you very much. Deflux, by the way, good morning. How are you doing? Welcome in. And Hexic, how's things? Sleep? I know not this word. I think Deflux gets less sleep than I do. Why are you not starting all 8 projects? Paloma is another good choice. Yes, Go with Sean does a lot of Pulumi stuff. I just don't know where to get started, and I don't want to rack up some massive bills. I definitely can't afford that. Come on. I mean, figuring out deployment is going to be a big step, and if I do it now early on, then even if I figure out how to do it for the wider app and then I scale it back for this particular piece, that's okay with me. Yeah, it's going to be challenging. I don't have Azure credit. And my fear is learning harsh lessons on stream. Pulumi is free for a single license. I have more resources managed in my company. Nice. Good morning, Mr. Anhorn. How are you doing? Okay, here we go. So, what we're trying to do today is drive ourselves crazy with behaviors in Entity Framework. So I'm going to remove the projects and save. That's interesting. It thinks it's not getting there. That's that garbage logic, isn't it? That is some beautiful, horrendous code. It should be free until I start making one. Yeah, nice. Okay, let's read it. That's clearly what's causing that. So what I'm trying to determine is not quite. Nice idea. So if new planning items or made that quite milly. Imagine that building something, and I can imagine that's quite rewarding to see it flourish like that. Okay. So the reason I just deleted that and didn't even try and analyze it is because I want to go through the thought pattern again, right? I'm not trying to influence myself with what I did before. So if not new planning items and existing planning items, or new planning items and not existing planning items, right? So if either of them differ, then that's an instant, yeah, we're going to do that. Pretty sure the MS Azure devs, with what they made, sitting there watching those millions roll in. Is Azure profitable? Or do they rely upon anything else? Can't wait. My side hustle is picking up. Need to add some missed features like audio. I do apologize the other day. I didn't get into your stream, Mr. Anhorn. I saw you go. I saw you put the notification in my Discord. I just was unable to get to the computer. I'm watching your stream on a phone. Cannot take it in. So if you want to see fascinating infrastructure and game dev and all sorts of other stuff, Mr. Anhorn is well worth a watch. Oh, yeah, I mean, pretty sure that's what pays for all the AI advertising budget. I would imagine. Sorry, that kind of blurred. The AI has been quite the bolster for the cloud platforms, because they're the only ones with the pure hardware available to just run this sort of stuff. Because they can the data centers they know how to procure and configure. Maybe that's why they're going so hard. Okay, so what I'm doing here is I just need to compare identifiers. I don't need to. What I was doing before was I was narrowing down the query here, but I can be smarter if I just pull the identifiers. So I'm comparing two lists, right? So again, I want to short circuit this. I want to if these don't agree at all, then yeah, I can just do what I need to do. Otherwise, if existing planning predictor identifiers dot accept or command dot right. So the only reason it wouldn't get into the code from before, because I've got the unit tester on the code, is that I have the this guard that won't call that method. So if it determines there's no changes, it doesn't bother trying to update anything. They have so much hardware. It's really nice to just ask them for beefy machines, and they're here you go for $100 an hour. You see 96 CPUs, 100 gig of RAM, and 6 GPUs. Wow. No, that's not what I want. Possible null reference argument for parameter first. Or not equal to null. No. That reads really badly, but it's fine. No, I can make that smarter again. Or let's not put all that logic in there. And really, I should be writing a unit tester on this. Right now, I just want to get to... Again, let's short circuit that. Enumerable, empty, period. At that price, it's crazy because a month of use should be enough to pay off the investment. So $100 an hour, $2,400 a day. That's a lot of money. I mean, if you've got... Yeah. That's, what's that? Multiple enumeration? Yeah. That, you don't like that now because that can be property. One. There you go. So if they're both true, then the count has to be the same. But no, that's not right. The count doesn't matter at all. Is that valid? Yeah, if the count changes, yeah, absolutely. Because it's still validating that they're all in there. So if the count is the same, this will still fall through to here. So yeah, that's fine. Let's go. And then I do need to come back and write unit test around that because that is ridiculous. So what I'm trying to validate here is if I remove. So if you've not seen this before, the problem I'm having is that when I update the database, whenever I get into this handler and I've removed an entity, the state that this pulls out is pre-delete or pre-remove. It works every single time for add, but the moment I remove an item, it's like it doesn't cache it properly, or it holds on to the state as it was. So it's very frustrating. So I go in here and save. We're not getting in, are we? Oh, why? Why? It's just one of those days. Okay. So let's go here. Let's remove these items. Let's save that. Okay, we get there. False. So we haven't changed them, apparently. With children, what is that called? With let's just go with full. Trying to describe the fact I'm going to get the relationship. So the problem was I'm loading just the entity. That list is always 0, so it's not going to necessarily call the update every time. So this now should function as intended. So again, it's just a guard to verify that I shouldn't call the domain service. So I probably don't need to do this, because the domain service has that logic in it anyway, because the domain service will only call update when there's actual changes on the individual things. So I probably can avoid this and just wire straight to the domain service. An ad is about to start. Appreciate it if you are afflicted by the ads. Is afflicted the right word? But unfortunately it's a necessity of Twitch. Okay, so I hit save. I get here. So now my associated project should true. Okay, because now I've loaded that associated that navigation property. Associated projects is now populated. Previously, it was always saying it was empty. So if I passed planning items in, that was fine. But the moment I clear the list, so it's not. This isn't a problem for the that causes the existing behavior. But now the issue here. So I have 0 coming in. So I should determine I'm going to remove 2 projects, right? I'll remove them things. And there we go. Nothing to add. We add the domain event. Now when we get here, yeah, we've got no projects. We hit F5. Oh. What does this look like? Associate project is empty. Okay, so that's correct. So now on this side of things, this should get processed eventually. These 11 should disappear. He says confidently. Interesting. So no associated projects exist here. Okay, I've got a bug on the view side there. So I was thinking about this, being that the integration event here is literally here's the current state of the system. Being smart about this makes no sense whatsoever. Right? I have the current state. So all I'm trying to do here is save myself some rights. But is it worth that? Why don't I just clear out the associations and then apply the new ones, right? So it's a little bit more expensive, but being clever about it could cost me more, because I could end up with, this sort of situation where if I've got a logic problem, this side, because again, this side is what you see. If this side disagrees with what the backend data is, then that's a problem, because then you could be making decisions off things you can't see. It is the downside to this sort of system where you have that distributed data. If again, this isn't the source of truth, this is the culmination of the events happening in the backend. So this is the visible state. The actual truth is here. But, again, you're like, oh, well, I'm already associated, but you're not. Okay, so if we go back here, I want a breakpoint there. And now we go and add. So again, if I refresh now, because I've removed those records manually, right? Let's go and add planning. We save that. So we're at the point where we're going to update the actual planning item. We're going to determine there's none to remove. We're going to determine there's one to add, right? We hit F5. And now we get here, and there's one. That's correct. So we've just added that in. So we hit F5. So we've got one associated project there. And eventually an 11 will appear here. There you go. Oh, auto refresh. Okay. So now our system agrees. We have, and the reason I'm refreshing every time is because I'm trying to make sure that I'm pulling the view state from the backend. Because of the data stores, it holds on to that. And again, if you're new to the stream, if you have questions about what I'm doing, you have thoughts or opinions, you're more than welcome to share them. I'm happy to discuss this stuff. I'm happy to demonstrate this stuff. It's okay to divert. So again, now we say there's one. If we remove that planning item now, what does it look like? So we get here, and we get here now. So it says there's one still. There's none there. But this says there's one still. So why does it hold on to a remove? But if I add one, it won't apply. So if I run that again now, right? So now the system's out of whack, because this side says there's one there. This side says there's none there. Right, so I've got to manually remove that to get the system back in the right state. Because again, for whatever reason, that said, I'd added one. So now let's go back in here and assign ticketing and tenant management, say. We hit F5, and we get to our handler, and we now say there's 3. So it's merged, it's taken the 2 that I've set and kept hold of the one that was there before. Why is it merged that state? If we look at the database, because again, this is happening out of process. This is happening in a background thread, right? The database says there's 2, but this thinks there's 3. It's merged what's in the database. So it's definitely queried the database, but it's merged it as if it's got hold of that set still. But if I stop and restart, that'll say 2. So which part of the system is caching and what is it caching? Because that's a merge. So let's run that. So now the system's completely balked again. So now, again, there's 2 here, right? Ticketing and tenant management. On here, there's 3. So I need to remove, I've got ticketing and tenant management. I need to remove 1 or 4, whichever one I did. 11, 11, 11, and 1. Right? So now, if I go in here and add another one, if I put story back in, and let's go to the domain service. And the reason I'm going to the domain service, or rather I'm going to the associate projects, is because I want to prove that this has the right number. So this again should have 2, right? Not 4. So if I hit save, associated projects has 2 items. It's loading the right thing from the database. Now if I run this, right, our database has 3. Now our event fires, this has 4. So this is now what added that 3rd one back in. Again, where am I going wrong? What am I doing? Like, which part of the system? Because that's merging the data. It genuinely thinks they're there. The record IDs are the right ones. So if we look, 2039, 2040, 2041, 2042, 2039, 2040, 2040, you know. It's got the right database IDs. So 2039 is the one I removed. So it's as if again, it's querying it. Why does it merge it? I don't know how to fix this. Because what is actually going wrong here? Let's try one thing. Let's try using var transaction equals new transaction scope. The word election enabled. Okay. So let's get the state of the system valid. So there's 3 there. There's 2 here. Is there a notification outbox message? Yeah, there is. Let's clear that. Truncate. Let's clear that. Again, the outbox messages only matter from yeah. So in this one, we think there's 2 projects, 2 and 3. Projects 2 and 3 are 729 and 5B3. Over here, 729 and 5B. So we don't believe this one is there, so we can save that. So we think there's 2 projects. Let's run that. I'd be very surprised if this saves, if this does anything differently, because in my mind these are separate contexts. These are separate processes. They are getting distinct instances of the repository, so they should be getting their own connections, and they're both clearly querying the data. I use the almost exact same code. It's different class, but it's the same code in both queries to get the data, and it's not holding on to what the state was previously in the one, but it is in the next one. So something to do with this integration handler is being weird. Okay, so let's reload this. And I'm open to ideas if anybody has any thoughts or opinions on this, because this is driving me insane. So if I add story and save, get to here, this is the modification to the state, right? So there's our 3 records. Now we get here, we get 3, right? We've added 1. So we get 3 associated projects. We run that. So now on this side, we should end up with 3 eventually. There we go. Run that. So now let's remove 1. So I'm going to reload just to make sure everything is refreshed and queried. So these have the right IDs. We're going to remove tenant management and save that. So we get up here, and just to verify, this associated projects is coming from the database, right? So it has 3 records. So it knows there's 3 there, it's removing 1. But when I come here, it still says there's 3. But if I look at the database, there's 2. Why does it still hold on to that 3rd one? And now it'll compound. So 2040, 2042, and 2043. Right, 2040 doesn't exist anymore. So why does that think there's 3? So it's not a transaction. I've rolled, committed that transaction. There. This is well before this planning item thing completes. I'm not going to leave a transaction in there that doesn't really have any value, because that documents the wrong things. All right. So, is this a bug caused by me? Or am I experiencing a bug in one of the libraries in between? And how do I validate this without massive changes to the code? But again, it works for add. This is a... So one of the things I just thought about there is, when I load this one up, I'm loading the state database, I get 3, I change the state, I do save, but I'm modifying the state here. So if it was sharing that state between these 2 requests, that'd be fine. But this is running in a different process, so this should get a totally different repository, a totally different. And again, it's querying because it's pulling those adds in there, right? And if it was pulling the behavior that this left behind, like it was, let's say it was using the same object and it was, oh yeah, that's fine, then it wouldn't. Then I don't know how to validate. Because they're using this planning identifier with details spec. They happen to be the same name, but that specification is here, right? So they are using completely different specs. So single result. They're identical though. So what I call full here. With details. That's a more accurate name. But these two are not the same spec. And the reason this is used here is because the domain service requires it, right? I don't have a reference to this application. I shouldn't have a reference to the application from here. So to prove this outright, I need to understand. Let's see, planning repository. See, there's no behavior I can override or thing I can intercept to kind of wrap. I mean, I could do planning repository. Base context console dot write line node I've never done this before. God knows. This could be very messy. I'm not quite sure I'm really going to get much value in this, but what I'm trying to do is determine that I'm getting is the same repository, or I'm getting distinct repositories from different places. Right, so that should have got me something, right? Console. Again, it queried. That's the query it ran. Console. What messages I put in there? Planning repository created. There's not searching here. That's too messy. Planning repository created at planning invoke call site. So this one ran. Right. And then let's remove. I'm not sure that's going to be giving me much value. Planning repository created. Again, I'm not super hopeful. Have we tried to do a request query immediately after committing changes? No, yeah, you are right there. I could try that briefly. So, so 8612. I'm getting multiple instances though. That's the yeah, there's the notification publisher. Fast lazy value. Outbox margin service. Hold on more. 1, 2. Why are they all? My concern here is why are they all outbots? None of them are. The stack traces all showing outbots. But you are right, Fubar. If I change that to, if I go to domain service, if I do this query right here, what happens? Look, listening while cycling. Certainly, thank you very much for the look. Appreciate it. Let's have a look at what verify looks like. Of course, the system state is now going to be balked. Associated projects, 11. Nothing there. Let's run that up. So if this comes out with the correct state, so I'm going to add some because we've seen adds always seem to work. But then the remove, the next one that I do, the remove, if that comes out with the correct state, then this is as close to the immediate as I can get. Okay, so let's add 2. Add planning and story. Save. right? We got 2, there's 2. So verify and planning items should agree. Actually, they should disagree when I remove one. So there's 2. Okay, so now let's remove one. 1 and 1. But if I go here, 2. It's going to be something that is incredibly frustratingly easy. I am very certain of this, but I cannot proceed unless I fix this. How many hours am I going to lose on this? So the immediate, because this update save changes, right? So if I go into update, right, go down into find usages. No, don't need that one. I can just go update async. There's a way of finding this. Go to implementation, repository base. It calls save changes. If you're not in a transaction, that is an immediate commit to the database, right? I'm not in a transaction. So when this loads, this is actually getting the fresh state of the database. So these agreed, right? So what it was before. Actually, that said 1 on 1. Why did that change? Because I changed the associated projects of this planning item. So they agreed because this is a fresh query though. But then immediately get to there and it says 2. But that's almost identical. I mean, apart from the different class, it's the identical query. Now again, this repository, we've shown through ads that it's definitely creating the database because it's pulling the new data. It's not getting the same state, that's proven. But something is caching it. So what do we do? So my options are kind of limited. I've got to figure out why this, because otherwise the entire system is just built on pure luck, right? I have to understand. Sorry for the microphone move. I have to understand. You say you get the correct data after the second query. Yeah, if I put that in there, right? Again, this saves changes. This commits to the database. I've put breakpoint there and verified that the database has actually changed by that point, right? This query pulls back the right data. This is not loading. This is not a copy of this instance. This is a brand new query pulling a new copy of the planning item from the database. But immediately after that, this fires with the exact same query again and gets the wrong answer. But if I add to it, this pulls the new records in the database. So it's definitely writing a query. It just doesn't deal with the removes. Not there in the view query. So querying straight after I've updated gets the right answer. Yeah. Oh, well, no, oh, sorry. You mean do this once more? Like that? Associate projects 1111. We now disagree, so what needs to stay? 085. 085 is 1. 11 and 1. Oh. Planning item. Oh, because I didn't let the event go through. So now the event will go through, that'll actually fix this automatically. If that comes through with the wrong answer, I'm royally screwed. Okay, so verify that. So now let's refresh that. So we load the latest data. We should have one planning item. Three, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Filipina Cemento. Welcome in. Thank you for the follow. Appreciate it. Okay, so we have one item on there, so planning. Let's add a tenant management and save that. We should hit some breakpoints eventually. Okay, so we get here. We have 2 planning items, 2 associated projects. Eventually we'll get to that. Right, so 2 and 2. Add is not the problem again, right? Add is definitely not the problem. So let's run that. So we have 2 projects there. And we have 2 projects here. If we refresh, planning and tenant management should be attached. Now let's remove one. So let's remove planning because planning was there before we added tenant management. So hit save. This says 1. That's been updated. And we've saved it. 2 and 2. Should say 1. We start running. So it dealt with the add, it failed on the remove. There is no default caching in the repository layer. You have to actually explicitly turn that on. There is no default caching in Entity Framework. You have to explicitly turn that on. And the repository is being created every single time I ask for it. And this event handler is being fired multiple times. As witnessed by the sheer number of planning repository created, 7 of 7, right? So it's getting created every single time I ask for it, right? So I'm going to put this back because I don't want to just jam everything in there because this is the sort of stuff you'd leave behind if you're not paying attention. How is remove handled? I determine the difference and I remove from the collection and then commit the state of the objects back. So it will deal with the deletes. Because it's not like it's not doing the deletes, right? It is removing the items. On a repository level, it's not handled on a repository level. That is, well, it's handled in as much as I'm calling update, and that's it, right? So I'm taking the entity that I've got and updating the entity. Entity framework takes over then. So I'm modifying a child collection of a parent object, because I never have a reason to touch associated projects in any other way. So that will, when I run it, but that's why I'm using the databases the way I am, is because this cost can be permitted. Right? It's not. Why do you not start the 8th project? I don't know what the 8th project is, but here you go. So now that's loading 1-on-1, right? So that's loading the right project up. And I have to keep an eye on the time. Okay, so that's loading. It's got tenant management. I go in, I add planning, right? So if I hit save there, what we'll see is in the console, insert into, we'll see an insert somewhere. Insert into associated projects. Right, so why are you updating? Interesting. It sets all the data again. But it does do insert into associated projects, right? So a lazy remove process. But it's not the problem is it's not the DB. Well, it's not the DB in so much as, so this is 2 and 2. So I've added one. It's fine, right? Entity framework. I get entity framework, but again, if I put this verify query right at here, it will load the correct data. It's the same query, right? After I've done the update, if I put it right here, it is correct, right? Even though they're in different contexts. But either way, let's let that go through. So now that's gone through. So now let's remove one. So the database has been updated, right? If we go here, it's been removed. If we go in the logs, here you'll see a delete eventually. Delete from associated projects where ID equals that. So we're doing an ID based delete from that thing. So it actually is working out the things to delete. It's writing a real query. And now when we get here on the event, it's 2 and 2. It thinks there's 2 there. So that those queries don't. And I shouldn't really close it then. I should have loved that. So okay. So my next step is to try and figure out if apply specification, get query context. There's no caching in here. Get query. Go to implementation. It's not. This will be a deep dark rabbit hole, but I'm 100% certain Ardallis is not doing anything to say, oh, have I seen this before in any sort of performance because this is evaluating the query to execute, right? This is not evaluating the data result. So the specification itself should have no bearing on the result unless it goes to execute. Go to implementation, repository base. Right, so again, create DB context, apply the specification onto the query, and then that. So it's building a query. Well, that's why I put that logging on before, and it's giving me a new repository every single time. That repository, again, is a simple connector to the DB context. It's not really very much more. I know people don't like repositories around DB context, but this is a library that allows me to apply the specifications, so I'm dealing with it. So yeah, this is a strange one. I haven't had an issue like this in a long time, and I'm hoping that it's a configuration issue on my side, but I don't think it is right this second. Yeah. But anyway, it is 9:20. I must turn into a pumpkin. Time does fly. I am most perturbed here because this stops me from doing a lot of stuff, because it's a fundamental component of my system. If I can't rely upon the data consistency, I'd love to say that it was true deflux. Believe me, I would love nothing more than to continue streaming for the next 8 hours. I would be in my element. Because the task I'm about to go to is looking through events in logs and finding problems that might exist. Google hasn't helped, or even ChatGPT. The problem is I don't know what to specifically look for, right? Am I looking for Entity Framework has a problem with loading this? But again, I've witnessed Entity Framework doesn't have a problem with loading this. It executes fine. The database commits fine. Am I looking at RDALIS specifications, in which case that's kind of a niche library? I'm not going to find a lot on that. Or am I looking, again, the repository doesn't do much. So even if it was giving me the same instance to the repository, it still executes the query, which we witness every time we add something, because it gets the new data when it adds. It just refuses to remove the old data when it removes. So part of the challenge here will be to try and identify how to, which part is actually going wrong in all this. Yeah. So, that said, let's go visit someone. Bit big. Don't like running into people who have like hundreds of people watching. That's always intimidating. Let's go see our friend Fullbots. He's working on music stuff, but I will continue to think about this, continue to try and research as much as I can and see if I can come up with an answer. If I find an answer before I stream next, I will put it in the Discord and with any links to any content I find. If this doesn't work, I have to rethink a lot of things, but I can't move forward without it because it is a kind of fundamental part of my system that should just work. There's no reason for it to do this. Yeah, fun. So let's go raid Mr. Fullbots, and I'll be back tomorrow I will again. I will update if I find anything. And hey, Wesley, sorry to be ending the stream. Hope you're well. And Trap, good morning. Thank you. And yeah, I'll see you all soon. Take care. Have a great day.